ex-husband demanded that I babysit his illegitimate child. I found out the truth about DNA. I am sitting in the dark in my home in Pennsylvania, listening to the silence of a house that used to be filled with laughter. My ex-husband, Mark, the man who shattered our vows for a younger woman named Tiffany, had the audacity to call me at 6 in the morning. He did not call to apologize. He called to demand that I provide free childcare for the very child he created with his mistress. He looked me in the eye and told me I owed him this because I never gave him a daughter. Can you imagine the cruelty it takes to say that to a mother? But they made a fatal mistake. They thought I was just a bitter, lonely freelancer they could exploit. They brought their chaos into my sanctuary, leaving their diaper bags and their secrets on my kitchen table. They did not know that while they were out spending my son's college fund on spa days, I was looking through the cracks of their perfect life. I found a piece of paper that changes everything. I hold the power to destroy Mark's entire world with a single text message. But looking at that innocent little girl, I feel a sickness in my gut that I cannot describe. At what point does mercy become stupidity? How far would you go to protect your child from the sins of his father? Please, everyone, I feel like I am losing my mind is less than #0. 2 hash is greater than what would you do? 小于井号0而井号大于. My name is Bella. I am 38 years old, a freelance graphic designer by trade, and a professional curator of silence by necessity. I live in a 2-story colonial revival in the quiet suburbs of Chester County, Pennsylvania, just far enough from Philadelphia to escape the noise, but close enough to feel the pulse of the city when I need to. To the outside world, specifically to the overly inquisitive members of my homeowners association, I am the picture of the resilient divorcee. I am the mother of 8-year-old Leo, a boy with my eyes and, unfortunately, his father's stubborn chin. I am the woman who smiles politely at the grocery store, who brings homemade gluten-free cookies to the PTA meetings, and who has managed to keep her dignity intact despite a humiliating divorce 3 years ago. But there are layers to this curated existence that no one sees. For instance, no one knows about the substantial inheritance I received 6 months ago from my late Aunt Margaret. It sits in a high-yield savings account that my ex-husband, Mark, knows nothing about. If he knew, he would drag me back to family court faster than I could blink, demanding a recalculation of the alimony payments he already complains about every single month. That money is my secret armor, a golden parachute for a plane I hope never crashes. It was 6 in the morning on a Tuesday. The sun had not yet fully breached the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gray. The house was still. This was my favorite time of day, the only hour when I felt entirely in control. I sat at my kitchen island, a slab of cold, pristine marble that I wiped down 3 times a day. My coffee was black, hot, and poured into a ceramic mug that cost more than my first car. I was reviewing a logo draft for a boutique law firm in Center City, enjoying the rhythmic tapping of my fingers against the laptop keys. Then the silence shattered. The phone buzzed against the marble, a harsh, vibrating drill sound that made my teeth ache. I looked at the screen. The name displayed was Mark. My stomach did a familiar somersault, a mix of anxiety and conditioned revulsion. We had been divorced for 3 years, yet seeing his name still triggered a spike of cortisol that tasted like copper in the back of my throat. Mark did not call at 6 in the morning unless something was wrong, or more likely, unless he wanted something. I let it ring 3 times. It was a small power play, a petty way of reminding him that I was no longer at his beck and call. Finally, I swiped the green button and brought the phone to my ear, keeping my voice dangerously neutral. "Hello, Mark." I did not ask how he was. I did not ask what he wanted. I just stated his name, like an accusation. "Bella, you are awake. Good?" His voice had not changed. It was still that smooth, confident baritone that used to charm me and now just sounded like the auditory equivalent of a used car salesman's handshake. He did not apologize for the hour. He assumed I was awake because, in his mind, the world revolved around his schedule. "I am awake now," I said, taking a slow sip of coffee. "Is Leo okay?" "Leo is fine. He is sleeping." "This is not about Leo." "Well, not directly." I waited. The silence on the line was heavy, filled with the static of his entitlement. I could hear him breathing, a sharp intake of air that signaled he was about to pitch me something. Mark was always pitching. He treated our marriage like a business merger and our divorce like a hostile takeover. "It is Tiffany," he said, dropping his voice to a whisper that was supposed to solicit sympathy. "She is struggling. Bella, really struggling." I felt a cold smirk tug at the corner of my mouth, though my tone remained flat. "I am sorry to hear that. It is postpartum depression," he continued, the words rushing out now. "It hit her late. Delayed onset. Daisy is 2 now." "I know, but the doctor says it can happen anytime. Tiffany is fragile. She needs to get out of the house, get back to herself." She found a job, a great opportunity at a marketing firm, but we are stuck on childcare. I stared out the kitchen window at my rose bushes. They were pruned to perfection, sharp thorns hidden beneath velvet petals. I knew where this was going, and the audacity of it took my breath away. "And?" I asked. "And daycares have year-long waiting lists," he said, his voice tightening. "Nannies are extortionate. You know how tight things are for us right now. The market has been brutal to my portfolio." I took another sip of coffee. I knew for a fact that Mark had leased a brand new luxury SUV last month. I had seen it when he dropped Leo off, but I said nothing. I let him dig his own grave. "So, I was thinking," he said, and I could hear the smile creeping into his voice. That salesman smile. "You are home all day. You do that freelance thing. You have the space. It would be perfect." I gripped the handle of my mug so hard my knuckles turned white. My freelance thing? He still spoke of my career as if it were a hobby. A little arts and crafts project I did to pass the time between laundry loads. "You want me to babysit Daisy?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not babysit. Bella. Help out. Family helping family. Just 3 days a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. 8 to 5. It would be good for Leo to see us working together. It would be good for Daisy to know her brother's mother." The air in my kitchen seemed to vanish. I felt lightheaded. This man, who had cheated on me with a 22-year-old receptionist named Tiffany, who had destroyed our family, who had gaslit me for years about my own sanity, was now asking me to provide free childcare for the product of that affair. "Mark," I said, carefully choosing my words, "I work full-time. Just because I work from home does not mean I am available to run a nursery. You are always so rigid," he snapped, the mask slipping instantly. "This is why we could never make it work. You have no flexibility. Look, Tiffany needs this. I need this. And honestly, Bella, you owe me this much." "I owe you?" I nearly a sharp, hysterical sound bubbling in my chest. I owe you? Yes, you do, he said, his voice dropping lower, becoming cruel. You know why? You never gave me a daughter. You know how much I wanted a little girl. Daisy is here now. She is family. This is your chance to step up. This is your chance to finally experience what it is like to raise a girl. It is a gift. Bella, I am offering you a chance to make up for the past. The silence that followed was deafening. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage, so pure, so white-hot, that it felt like I had swallowed a star. You never gave me a daughter. The words echoed in my skull. We had tried for a second child for years. I had suffered 2 miscarriages before we stopped. He knew that. He knew every tear, every doctor's appointment, every shattered hope. And now, he was using my biological trauma as a bargaining chip to get free babysitting for his mistress turned wife. In that moment, I should have hung up. I should have told him to rot in hell and blocked his number. Any sane person would have, but I did not. I stood there in my immaculate kitchen, surrounded by the silence I had bought with my dignity, and a dark, twisted thought bloomed in the back of my mind. If I said no, he would paint me as the villain to Leo. He would tell our son that mommy hates his little sister. He would twist the narrative until I was the bitter, barren ex-wife who refused to help a struggling young mother. But if I said yes is less than #0, arting how dayu. If I said yes, I would have a front row seat. I had suspected for months that things were not as perfect in the new life of Mark and Tiffany as they pretended on social media. I had seen the fraying cuffs on Mark's shirts. I had noticed that Tiffany's smile in photos looked increasingly strained. If I let them into my house, I would see everything. I would see the cracks, and maybe, just maybe, I could give those cracks a little push. The saintly mother mask I wore for Leo was heavy, but it was useful. It was the perfect camouflage. Bella? Mark prompted, impatient now. Are you there? I took a deep breath, pushing the rage down into that deep, dark cellar where I kept all my true feelings. I smoothed the front of my silk robe. I am here, I said, my voice calm, almost sweet. I was just thinking, Mark, it is a lot to ask. It is for family. He pressed. Think about Leo. He loves Daisy. Do not be the reason they are kept apart. He was good. He knew exactly where to stick the knife. He knew my son was my weakness. Fine. I said, fine? He sounded surprised. I will try it. One day, just to see how it goes. I am not promising anything long-term. Excellent, he said, the triumph oozing through the speaker. I knew you would be reasonable. We will bring her over tomorrow. Oh, and Bella? What? Thank you. You are finally acting like the woman I married. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there for a long time, listening to the dial tone. I lowered the phone slowly and placed it back on the marble counter. My reflection in the black screen of the microwave stared back at me. I looked pale. My eyes were wide, dark pools of something that looked disturbingly like excitement. I walked over to the sink and poured the rest of my expensive coffee down the drain. It tasted bitter now. Tomorrow, the sanctuary I had built would be invaded. The child who represented the destruction of my marriage would be walking through my front door. The woman who had slept in my bed while I was at my mother's funeral would be standing on my porch, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Mark thought he had won. He thought he had manipulated me into submission, just like he used to. He thought I was the same Bella, passive, eager to please, desperate to be good. He was wrong. I walked to the living room and sat on my pristine cream-colored sofa. I looked around at the curated art on the walls, the vase of fresh lilies on the mantelpiece. Everything was perfect. Everything was mine. Let them come, I whispered to the empty room. I was not just opening my door to them. I was opening a trap. I just did not know yet who would be caught inside. The morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor. They looked like bars of a cage, or perhaps the teeth of a beast waiting to snap shut. I picked up my iPad and opened my calendar. I marked Daisy for tomorrow. Then, I opened a hidden folder on my device. One password protected and buried deep within the system files. It was titled simply, Contingencies. Inside were scanned copies of the divorce decree, the custody agreement, and screenshots of every nasty text message Mark had sent me over the last 3 years. I added a new note to the file. Date, October 24th. Subject, the request. Mark demands childcare. Leverages infertility trauma. Claims financial strain despite new lease. I was a freelancer. Yes, but my job wasn't just graphic design. It was seeing the details that others missed. It was finding the negative space where the truth hid. And if Mark and Tiffany wanted to play happy family in my house, they were about to learn that the lighting here was very, very unforgiving. I stood up and smoothed my robe again. It was time to wake Leo. I needed to put on my mother face. I needed to smile and make pancakes and pretend that my heart wasn't beating with the slow, heavy rhythm of a war drum. Mom? I turned. Leo was standing at the top of the stairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked so small, so innocent. Good morning. Baby? I called out, my voice singing with false cheer. Guess what? Daddy called. You might get to see your sister tomorrow. Leo's face lit up. Really? Daisy is coming here? Maybe, I said, walking towards the stairs to embrace him. Just maybe. I hugged him tight, burying my face in his hair that smelled of baby shampoo and sleep. Over his shoulder, I looked at the front door. The locks were sturdy, the wood was solid, but the enemy was no longer at the gates. I had just invited them in. The silence that followed Mark's phone call was not the peaceful solitude I usually cherished. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet, the kind that precedes a thunderstorm. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the hum of my high-end computer and the soft rustle of the weeping willow outside the window. But I could not focus. My cursor blinked rhythmically on the screen, a mocking heartbeat counting away the seconds of my hesitation. I had told him I would try. I had uttered the word, fine. It felt like a betrayal of my own boundaries. A small hairline fracture in the fortress I had spent 3 years building. Why did I do it? I swiveled my ergonomic chair away from the desk and stared at a framed photograph on the bookshelf. It was a picture of Leo and me at the beach last summer. He was laughing, his face smeared with ice cream, looking at me with absolute adoration. That look was my drug. It was also my shackle. Mark knew that. He knew that the only thing stronger than my hatred for him was my desperate need to be the better parent. If I refused to help, Mark would spin a narrative of cruelty. He would tell Leo that his mother did not want him to see his sister. He would plant seeds of resentment in my son's heart that would grow into weeds I could never fully pull out. I stood up and paced the hardwood floor. My reflection in the glass cabinet doors looked ghostly. I was trapped between my pride and my son's perception of me. It was a cage made of guilt, and Mark held the key. Then, My phone buzzed again. It was not a call this time. It was a text message. The name on the screen made my stomach turn. Tiffany. I picked up the phone as if it were a poisonous insect. I slid my thumb across the screen to unlock it. Hey, Bella. So sorry Mark woke you up this morning. You know how he gets when he is worried about his girls. Love. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for being open to this. It means so much. I stared at the screen, analyzing every word. The exclamation points were like little daggers disguised as confetti. His girls, she was marking her territory, reminding me that I was the outsider now, the relic of a past life. But it was the second message that truly twisted the knife. An image loaded on the screen. It was a photo taken at a park. Leo was pushing Daisy on a swing. The sun was setting behind them, casting a golden halo over their heads. Leo was smiling that wide, toothy grin that made my heart ache, and Daisy was laughing, her tiny hands gripping the chains of the swing. They looked beautiful. They looked like siblings. Beneath the photo, Tiffany had written, "Look at them. They love each other so much. Please do not let your feelings about the past ruin this for them. Do not divide them just because of petty hatred. Let us be adults for the kids." My breath hitched in my throat. Petty hatred, the audacity was breathtaking. She was the woman who had knowingly slept with a married man. She was the one who had helped dismantle my family while I was grieving my mother. And now, she was lecturing me on adulthood and petty hatred. Gaslighting is not always shouting. Sometimes, it is a soft voice telling you that your memories are wrong, that your pain is an inconvenience, that your anger is a character flaw. Tiffany was painting a picture where I was the villain standing in the way of this golden, sun-drenched happiness. If I said no now, I would be proving her right. I would be the bitter ex-wife, destroying a family bond. I felt a tear of frustration prick my eye, hot and stinging. I wiped it away furiously. I would not cry over them. Not anymore. I typed a reply. My fingers hit the glass screen with more force than necessary. I am doing this for Leo. Drop her off at 8 tomorrow. I hit send before I could change my mind. There, it was done. I had just invited the vampire into my home, and I had even unlocked the window. The next morning, the air was crisp and cold. I had woken up 2 hours early to prepare the house. I moved my expensive Japanese vase to the top shelf of the bookcase. I rolled up the silk Persian rug in the hallway and replaced it with a durable, washable runner. I locked the door to my office. I was treating this visit not as a playdate, but as a containment operation. At 8 o'clock sharp, a car pulled into my driveway. It was not the luxury SUV Mark had been driving. It was a beat-up sedan that I did not recognize, its bumper hanging slightly loose on the left side. I watched through the sheer curtains of the living room window. The driver's door opened, and Tiffany stepped out. She did not look like someone going to a job interview at a high-end marketing firm. She was wearing tight yoga pants that cost more than my weekly grocery bill and an oversized hoodie that looked suspiciously like one of Mark's old college sweatshirts. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun that was meant to look effortless but just looked unwashed. She wore enormous sunglasses that covered half her face. She opened the back door and unbuckled Daisy. The child looked disheveled, her face sticky with what looked like dried jam. Daisy was holding a plastic toy that made a loud screeching noise as she squeezed it. But then, Tiffany opened the other back door. My eyes widened. A massive head emerged, followed by a muscular, brindle body. It was a pit bull, a huge, unneutered male pit bull with a thick chain collar. The dog shook its body, sending a spray of saliva into the air, and let out a low, guttural bark that vibrated against my window pane. I froze. Mark had said nothing about a dog. The doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house like a fire alarm. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my cashmere cardigan, and opened the door. "Hi," Tiffany chirped. She pushed her sunglasses up onto her head. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but her smile was bright. Too bright, it did not reach her eyes. "Tiffany," I said, blocking the doorway with my body. "What is that?" I pointed a manicured finger at the beast sniffing my porch planters. "Oh, that is Buster," Tiffany said, laughing as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "He is Daisy's emotional support dog. Or, well, they are emotionally supported by each other. He has terrible separation anxiety. If I leave him at home alone, he eats the drywall. Literally, he ate a hole through the pantry door last week." She said it casually, as if property destruction was a quirky personality trait. "You cannot bring a dog here," I said firmly. "I have cats. I have white furniture." Mark did not mention a dog. "Oh, Mark forgets everything," she said, rolling her eyes. "Look, Bella, I really do not have time to argue. My interview is in 40 minutes and traffic is a nightmare. He is harmless. He loves kids. Just let him in the backyard if he gets rowdy. Please?" She did not wait for an answer. She ushered Daisy forward. Daisy, sensing an opening, darted past my legs and ran into my hallway. "Daisy, no shoes," I called out, but it was too late. Muddy little footprints were already stamped onto my pristine hardwood floor. While I was distracted by the child, Tiffany let go of the leash. "Go on, Buster. Be a good boy," she cooed. The dog barreled past me. He was pure muscle and momentum. He nearly knocked me over as he squeezed through the doorway, his thick tail whipping against my thigh like a baton. He trotted into my living room, his nails clicking loudly on the floor, and immediately lifted his leg against my coat rack. "No," I shouted. I lunged forward, grabbing the dog by the collar and yanking him away just as a stream of urine hit the base of the rack. Tiffany stood on the porch, checking her reflection in her phone screen. "Oops, sorry. He is just marking his territory. He is a little nervous in new places. Anyway, her diaper bag is here. There are snacks, but she only eats organic fruit snacks. The ones in the purple box. Do not give her anything with red dye number 40. It makes her hyper. I will be back by 5. She turned on her heel and practically ran to her car. "Tiffany, wait," I yelled, holding the straining dog with one hand and trying to grab the diaper bag with the other. "Bye. Thank you. You are a lifesaver," she called back over her shoulder without looking. She jumped into the car. The engine roared to life with a sputtering cough, and she reversed out of my driveway with reckless speed. I stood in my open doorway, stunned. The cold morning air rushed in, chilling me to the bone. In my living room, Daisy was already pulling books off the bottom shelf of my bookcase, throwing them onto the floor with gleeful abandonment. The dog, Buster, was currently sniffing the expensive throw pillows on my sofa, a low growl rumbling in his throat as he eyed my terrified cat, who was perched high atop the kitchen cabinets. I slammed the front door shut and locked it. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home felt less like security and more like the ceiling of a tomb. I looked at the chaos that had erupted in my sanctuary in less than 60 seconds. The mud on the floor, the smell of wet dog, the screeching of the plastic toy. This was not a favor. This was an invasion. I looked down at the diaper bag Tiffany had left on the floor. It was heavy, bulging with items. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of anger and panic. I had been outmaneuvered. I had let my guard down for 1 second, manipulated by a photograph and a guilt trip. And now my home was under siege. I looked at Daisy. She looked up at me, her big brown eyes identical to Mark's. She smiled, revealing a row of tiny, crooked teeth. "Cookie," she demanded. I looked at the dog. He looked at me with cold, yellow eyes, daring me to challenge him. "I am not a babysitter," I whispered to myself, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I am a hostage." I walked over to the kitchen island and grabbed a roll of paper towels and a bottle of disinfectant spray. My hands were shaking, not from fear of the dog or the child, but from the sheer, overwhelming realization of how much I hated them. I hated their entitlement. I hated their mess. I hated that they thought they could just dump their chaotic lives into my living room and drive away. But as I sprayed the disinfectant on the floor, wiping away the mud with aggressive strokes, a thought occurred to me. Tiffany had left in a hurry. She said she had an interview, but she was wearing yoga pants, and she had forgotten to give me any emergency contact numbers. I looked at the diaper bag again. It sat there, innocent and unassuming. If I was going to be a prisoner in my own home for the next 9 hours, I might as well know exactly who I was locked in with. I finished cleaning the spot, threw the paper towel into the trash with a violent force, and walked towards the bag. The dog watched me. The child watched me. But the house was mine, and in my house, I saw everything. The first 4 hours of babysitting Daisy were not just difficult. They were a systematic dismantling of my sanity. If Tiffany had dropped off a hurricane instead of a toddler, the damage would have been comparable, though perhaps the hurricane would have been less sticky. By noon, my pristine sanctuary had been transformed into a war zone. The air, usually scented with lavender and old paper, now reeked of wet dog fur and processed fruit snacks. Buster, the unneutered pit bull, had decided that the leg of my antique mahogany coffee table was a chew toy. Every time I tried to reprimand him, he would freeze and emit a low, vibrating growl that rattled in his chest, his yellow eyes fixing on me with a predatory stillness that made the hair on my arms stand up. I retreated, defeated, choosing the safety of my limbs over the integrity of my furniture. Daisy was no better. She was a whirlwind of uncontained energy and entitlement. She did not ask for things. She demanded them with a piercing shriek that could shatter glass. When I told her that she could not color on the walls with her markers, she looked me dead in the eye and dragged the purple felt tip across my cream-colored wallpaper, leaving a jagged scar of defiance. But the breaking point came at 1 o'clock. I was in the kitchen, frantically trying to scrub grape juice out of the rug, when I heard a crash from the living room. It was the sound of heavy ceramics hitting hard wood, a sickening, final crunch that echoed through the house. I ran into the room. There, amidst the shards of my Japanese vase, a piece I had brought back from Kyoto 10 years ago, a piece that had survived 3 moves and a divorce, stood Daisy. She was holding a plastic wand, looking down at the wreckage, not with guilt, but with mild curiosity. Buster was sniffing the pieces, his tail wagging, oblivious to the tragedy. Oh, Daisy said. She did not cry. She did not run to me for comfort. She just stepped over the pieces of my memories and went back to the television, where a cartoon sponge was laughing maniacally. I sank to my knees, My hands hovered over the broken porcelain. That vase had been the first thing I bought with my own money as a freelance designer. It represented my independence. Now, it was dust. I felt a scream building in my throat, a primal roar of frustration, but I swallowed it down. I could not scream at a 2-year-old. I could not scream at a dog. I stood up, my knees cracking, and looked at the clock. It was 1:15 in the afternoon. Tiffany had not called. She had not texted. Not once. For a mother who claimed to have crippling separation anxiety. For a woman whose husband claimed she was suffering from severe postpartum depression. Her silence was deafening. When Leo was 2, I could barely go to the grocery store without checking my phone 5 times. Something was wrong. My eyes drifted to the diaper bag sitting on the armchair. It was a chaotic explosion of diapers, wipes, and toys. But poking out of the side pocket was the corner of a silver tablet. I recognized it immediately. It was an old iPad, one of the early generations. It had a crack on the top left corner of the screen. It was Leo's old iPad. Mark had taken it when he moved out, claiming he needed it for work emails. But I knew he just wanted it because he had paid for half of it. I walked over to the bag. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a familiar rhythm of suspicion and adrenaline. I knew I should not touch it. It was an invasion of privacy. It was controlling. It was exactly the kind of behavior Mark had accused me of during our marriage counseling sessions. Bella, you are paranoid. Bella, you are suffocating me. His voice echoed in my head, a ghost of gaslighting past. But looking at the shattered vase and the indifferent child, the good ex-wife in me finally died. I reached out and pulled the iPad from the bag. I pressed the home button. The screen lit up. It was locked. Of course. But I knew Mark. I knew him better than he knew himself. He was a creature of habit, a man who thought he was too smart to be hacked, but too lazy to change his routine. I typed in the passcode 1024. His birthday, October 24th. The iPad unlocked. My breath hitched. I was in. I did not know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe a text message complaining about me. Maybe a job offer email to prove the interview was real. I tapped on the Find My app because the iPad was signed into Mark's Apple ID, an account we used to share, and one he had apparently never bothered to remove this specific device from. I could see the location of all his devices, including the iPhone Tiffany was currently carrying. A map of Philadelphia appeared on the screen. A blue dot pulsed, indicating my location in the suburbs. A second dot, labeled Tiffany's iPhone, pulsed in the city. I zoomed in. My fingers trembled as I pinched the screen. I expected to see the dot hovering over the business district, near the marketing firms and high-rise offices. Instead, the dot was hovering over a large complex on Walnut Street. I tapped the location pin. The name of the establishment popped up, the Sanctuary Spa and Salon. I stared at the screen, blinking rapidly. Maybe she was interviewing at the spa? Maybe they needed a marketing manager? I watched the dot. It did not move. Then, a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was an email alert from the bank. Transaction alert, Chase Sapphire Reserve. Amount, $350. Merchant, the Sanctuary Spa. Time, 1:20 p.m. The air in the room seemed to vanish. $350. That was not a lunch. That was not parking. That was a full package. Massage, facial, manicure, while my house was being destroyed by her untrained dog and her neglected child. While I was scrubbing urine out of my floorboards, Tiffany was getting a facial, but the horror was just beginning. Another notification slid down. Transaction alert. Chase Sapphire Reserve. Amount $420. Merchant Nordstrom. Wait, I frowned. That credit card. The Chase Sapphire Reserve. Mark had canceled his personal card last year during the divorce settlement, claiming he was switching banks. He had told the judge he was broke, that his assets were frozen. I quickly minimized the map and opened the email app. I searched for Chase. The statements loaded. My eyes scanned the account details, and my blood turned to ice. The card was not linked to Mark's personal checking account. It was linked to a custodial account, Leo James, College Savings Fund. I felt the room spin. I had to grab the back of the armchair to steady myself. When Leo was born, Mark's parents had set up a college fund. It was a substantial amount of money, meant to grow interest until Leo turned 18. Mark was the custodian on the account. During the divorce, I had fought to have my name added, but Mark's lawyer had successfully argued that since the money came from Mark's side of the family, he should manage it. The judge had agreed, with the stipulation that the funds were only to be used for Leo's educational or medical needs. Mark had linked a credit card to that account, and now Tiffany was using it to buy designer clothes and spa treatments. They were stealing from my son. The rage that exploded in my chest was not the hot, fiery anger of the morning. It was cold. It was absolute. It was the kind of rage that burns down cities. I pulled my own phone from my pocket. My hands were surprisingly steady now. I dialed Mark's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Bella, how is it going? Is everything okay?" His voice was casual, breezy. "Where is Tiffany?" I asked. My voice was low, devoid of any emotion. "She is at her interview." "Of course," Mark said, sounding confused. "Why? Is Daisy okay?" "She is at the Sanctuary Spa on Walnut Street." "Mark," I said, "and 10 minutes ago, she spent $350, and just now, she is at Nordstrom." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long, heavy pause. Then, Mark laughed. It was a nervous, stuttering sound. "You are crazy. Bella, you are tracking her? That is illegal. That is stalking. I knew you were obsessive, but this is a new low even for you. Do not lie to me." I cut him off. "I am looking at the transaction alerts. Mark, she is using the card linked to Leo's college fund. You are letting your mistress burn through our son's future on facials and handbags." The line went dead silent again. Then, Mark's voice changed. The breezy ex-husband was gone. In his place was the monster I had divorced. "Watch your mouth, Bella," he hissed. "First of all, she is my wife, not my mistress. Second, that money is under my control. I can move funds around however I see fit. It is a loan. I am borrowing against it to get us back on our feet. Once Tiffany gets this job, we will pay it back." "She is not at a job interview," I screamed, losing my composure for the first time. "She is shopping. She is networking," Mark shouted back, the volume on his end peaking, distorting his voice. "She has to look the part to get the part. You would not understand that, sitting at home in your pajamas all day playing with logos. You have no idea how the real world works. You are so jealous. Bella, it is pathetic. You see a young, beautiful woman trying to make something of herself, and all you want to do is tear her down because you are old and bitter." I stood there, phone pressed to my ear. listening to him rewrite reality in real time. He was justifying theft, he was justifying neglect, and he was turning it all around to make me the villain. "If you touch that money again," I said, my voice shaking, "I will call the police. I will call the judge." "Go ahead," Mark challenged. "You do that. You drag us back to court. And while you are at it, explain to the judge why you are hacking into my wife's personal devices. Explain why you are stalking us. I will sue you for harassment. Bella, I will paint you as an unstable, vindictive stalker who is a danger to my children. Do you think a judge will give you full custody of Leo when I show them how obsessed you are?" He paused, letting the threat hang in the air like poison gas. "Just do your job. Bella, watch the kid. We will pick her up at 5. And if you say one word about this to Leo, if you poison him against his father, I will make sure you never see him on a weekend again." He hung up. I lowered the phone slowly. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I looked around the room. Daisy was now banging the plastic wand against the television screen. Buster was chewing on the corner of the rug. The shattered vase lay on the floor, a symbol of everything that had been broken in my life. Mark was right about one thing. If I went to the police now, with evidence obtained by hacking an iPad, it would be messy. He would twist it. He was a master manipulator, and he had the charm to sway mediators. He would make it look like a misunderstanding, a lawn, and paint me as the crazy ex-wife spying on him. I looked at the iPad in my hand. I wiped the screen with the hem of my shirt, removing my fingerprints. I placed it back into the diaper bag, exactly how I had found it. Then, I walked over to the window and looked out at my garden. The afternoon sun was shining, but I felt cold. He thought he had silenced me. He thought his threat had worked, and in a way, it had. I was not going to scream anymore. I was not going to cry. I looked at my reflection in the window glass. The woman staring back at me looked different. The soft edges were gone. Her eyes were hard. I turned back to the room. "Daisy," I said. The child looked at me, surprised by the sudden authority in my voice. "Sit down." Now, she sat, blinking in confusion. Even the dog stopped chewing and looked up. I walked to the kitchen and opened my laptop. I did not go to the police website. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet. I began to type. Date: October 25th. Incident: theft of funds. Amount: $770. Evidence: transaction alerts. Location data: witnessed. I was not going to react. I was going to record. I was going to let them dig their hole deeper and deeper until they were so far down that they would never see the sun again. Mark wanted me to watch his kid. Fine. I would watch. I would watch everything. I looked at the shattered vase on the floor one last time. I did not sweep it up. I left it there. I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the mess. Then I took a photo of the dog chewing the table. Then I took a photo of the mud on the floor. Evidence. It was all evidence. Mark had made a fatal mistake. He thought he was dumping his baggage on a pushover. He did not realize he was handing the murder weapon to the detective. I sat down on the sofa, amidst the ruin of my life, and waited for 5 o'clock. My hands were folded in my lap. I was perfectly still. The war had officially begun. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the room. It was 2 in the morning. The house was finally quiet. The chaotic energy of Daisy and the destructive force of Buster having departed hours ago. But I could not sleep. I sat at my kitchen island, staring at the digital banking portal for the custodial account titled Leo James College Savings. The numbers on the screen were a testament to theft. Plain and simple, $3,200. That was the total amount withdrawn in the last 3 weeks alone. It was not just the spa day or the Nordstrom spree. It was dinners at steakhouses. It was gas station charges. It was a subscription to a premium streaming service. Mark was bleeding our son's future dry, sip by sip, treating a savings account meant for tuition like a personal piggy bank. My finger hovered over the print button. I wanted to take this to a lawyer immediately. I wanted to scorch the earth. But then, my eyes drifted to the other tab open on my browser, my own secret bank account, the one holding Aunt Margaret's inheritance. If I dragged Mark to court now over $3,000, he would demand a full financial disclosure. He would find the inheritance, and knowing Mark and the predatory shark of a lawyer he employed, he would argue that my sudden increase in assets meant I no longer needed spousal support. He might even argue that I should pay him. The math was cruel. To save $3,000 for Leo, I might lose $2,000 a month in alimony for the next 5 years. I was trapped. I was in a financial standoff where the person with the moral high ground was the one with the most to lose. I closed the laptop with a snap. I felt sick, a heavy, leaden weight settled in my stomach. I was going to have to watch the theft continue, at least for now, until I could find a way to strike without exposing my own flank. The next afternoon, the sound of a powerful engine purring in my driveway pulled me from my thoughts. It was Friday, pickup time. I walked to the front window, expecting to see Tiffany's beat-up sedan, or perhaps a rental. Instead, I saw a monster of chrome and black paint. It was a brand new Range Rover. The car was pristine, the sunlight gleaming off its polished curves. It looked like it had rolled off the showroom floor 5 minutes ago. The driver's side door opened, and Mark stepped out. He was wearing a fitted suit, sunglasses, and a smile that reeked of unearned confidence. He walked up the path to my front door as if he were walking a red carpet. I opened the door before he could ring the bell, desperate to keep the noise down. Leo was upstairs doing homework, and I did not want him to witness the charade. "Nice car," I said, my voice dripping with ice. Mark took off his sunglasses and grinned. "Do you like it?" "It is a lease. Business expense. You have to spend money to make money, right? Clients need to see that you are successful before they trust you with their portfolio." I crossed my arms over my chest. "You told me on Tuesday that the market was brutal. You told me you were broke. You are looting our son's college fund to buy handbags for your wife. And now you drive this?" Mark's smile vanished instantly. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell his expensive cologne, a scent that used to comfort me, but now made me nauseous. "Lower your voice. Bella, I told you, that money is a loan, and this car, this is necessary. You would not understand because you do not have a real career. You sit here in your little house, playing with fonts and colors. I am out there building an empire." He pushed past me into the hallway. "Where is Daisy?" "She is in the living room," I said, turning to follow him. "She broke a lamp today." And the dog chewed the baseboard in the hallway. Mark waved his hand dismissively. "Stuff. It is just stuff. Bella, you are so materialistic. Besides, if you were watching them properly, accidents would not happen." I felt the blood rushing to my ears. The gaslighting was so blatant, so practiced. He was blaming me for his dog destroying my house. He picked up Daisy, who was sitting amidst a pile of torn magazines. "Hey, princess, did you have fun with Auntie Bella?" Daisy giggled. Mark turned to me, bouncing the child on his hip. Look, Bella, we need to talk business. Business? I asked. Tiffany is exhausted. The interview went well, but she needs to focus. And honestly, dragging Daisy back and forth 3 days a week is disruptive. We were thinking is less than #0. Jinghao, Dayu. He paused, waiting for me to lean in, to ask. I did not move. We were thinking it makes more sense for you to take Daisy full-time, Monday through Friday, 8 to 6. I stared at him. You must be joking. I am serious, Mark said. And here is the deal. I know I am behind on alimony. Things are tight, liquidity-wise. So, if you watch Daisy full-time, we will consider that your contribution, we will call the alimony even for this month, and maybe next month too. It is a win-win. You get to spend time with family. Leo gets his sister, and you stop harassing me for checks I cannot write right now. My mouth fell open. He was proposing that I work 50 hours a week as a nanny for his affair partner's child, and my payment would be is less than #0. 2 is greater than him not paying me the court-ordered money he already owed me. Mark, I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. That is not a deal. That is slavery. You cannot just stop paying alimony. That is illegal. Illegal. Schmillegal. Mark scoffed. Go ahead. Take me to court. It will take 6 months to get a hearing. By then, I will have hidden enough assets that the judge will lower my payments anyway. Do you really want to go down that road? Or do you want to be a good mother and help us out? He looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes. He knew he had me. He knew I hated conflict. He knew I wanted peace for Leo. I looked at Daisy. She was innocent in this, but her parents were monsters. I will think about it. I lead. Good girl, Mark said. He patted my cheek, a condescending, patronizing tap that made me want to bite his fingers off. Oh, and one more thing, he added. Reaching into his pocket, Tiffany made a list. Since Daisy is going to be spending more time here, she wants to make sure her diet is consistent. He handed me a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a grocery list, but it was not just a list. It was a demand letter. Whole foods only. Organic blueberries, not the frozen kind. Almond milk unsweetened. Vanilla, brand specific. Gluten-free dinosaur nuggets. Avocado oil chips. Manuka honey. The list went on for a page. She wants you to pick these up before Monday, Mark said casually. She forgot to go shopping. Just put it on your tab. Consider it a contribution to the cause. He walked out the door, carrying Daisy, whistling a tune. He did not look back. He climbed into his shiny new Range Rover and drove away, leaving me standing in my hallway with a grocery list that cost more than my weekly utility bill. I walked into the kitchen and slammed the list onto the counter. Inner monologue. He thinks I am weak. He thinks I am a doormat. He is pushing and pushing, seeing how far he can bend me before I break. But he is forgetting something. Doormats lie at the threshold. We see who comes in and who goes out, and we know where the dirt is hidden. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety. I did not buy the Manuka honey. I did not buy the organic blueberries. I decided to play a passive-aggressive game of compliance. If they asked, I would say the store was out of stock. But on Monday morning, the invasion escalated. Tiffany dropped Daisy off. This time, she did not even get out of the car. She just honked the horn until I came out, then thrust Daisy and the dog at me through the window before speeding off to her job. When I brought the diaper bag inside, I noticed it was heavier than usual. I unpacked it on the kitchen table, underneath the diapers and wipes. There were clothes, but not children's clothes. There was a gray cashmere sweater. It was a woman's sweater, size small. It smelled of Tiffany's perfume, a cloying, floral scent that lingered in the air. Why was Tiffany's sweater in Daisy's bag? I dug deeper. I found a men's electric shaver. It was Mark's. I recognized the brand. I found a bottle of expensive shampoo, half used. I found a tube of toothpaste, squeezed from the middle. I stared at the items spread out on my table. This was not a mistake. You do not accidentally pack a razor and a liter of shampoo into a toddler's diaper bag. They were moving in. It was subtle. It was slow. It was the strategy of the squatter. First, you leave a toothbrush, then a change of clothes. Then you start sleeping over just for one night because it is late or the weather is bad. And before the homeowner realizes what is happening, they have established residency. I remembered the foreclosure notice I had seen in my mind's eye, the fear that had gripped me when I first suspected their financial ruin. They were not just broke, they were homeless in the making, and they had chosen my house as their lifeboat. I walked into the living room. Buster was asleep on the sofa, his head resting on one of my throw pillows. He looked comfortable. He looked settled. I picked up Tiffany's sweater. The fabric was soft, expensive. I gripped it tightly. They were not just invading my space. They were erasing me. They were replacing my scent with theirs, my order with their chaos. Mark's threat about the alimony was just the beginning. He was tightening the noose, cutting off my resources while simultaneously draining my pantry and occupying my square footage. I walked to the trash can. I wanted to throw the sweater away. I wanted to burn it, but I stopped. No, throwing it away would be emotional. Throwing it away would be reacting. I needed to be smarter. I walked upstairs to the guest bedroom, the one I rarely used. I opened the closet. It was empty, save for a few boxes of winter coats. I tossed Tiffany's sweater onto the floor of the closet. I tossed the razor in after it. If they wanted to leave things here, fine. I would keep them. I would keep everything. I was building a museum of their desperation. I went back downstairs and sat at my computer. I opened the spreadsheet I had started. Date, October 28th. Incident, unauthorized storage of personal property. Items, adult clothing, hygiene products. Implication, intent to establish residency. I typed furiously. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was being overtaken by a cold, hard resolve. I looked at the dog again. Hey, Buster, I said softly. The dog opened one eye. Enjoy the couch while you can, I whispered, because when this is over, not even the fleas will want to stay with them. I was spiraling. Yes, my sanctuary was crumbling. My bank account was threatened. My boundaries were being violated. But in the center of the spiral, in the eye of the storm, I was beginning to see the pattern. They were desperate. They were sloppy. And sloppy people made mistakes. I just had to wait for the big one. It was Thursday afternoon. The sky outside was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that seemed to mirror the atmospheric pressure building inside my chest. Daisy was finally asleep on the living room rug, exhausted after a 3-hour tantrum over the color of her sippy cup. Buster, the gargantuan pit bull, was snoring loudly in the corner, his paws twitching as he chased dream rabbits. I was cleaning up the debris of the day. My living room looked less like a home and more like the aftermath of a small, localized, natural disaster. Toys were scattered like shrapnel. Crushed crackers were embedded in the fibers of my Persian rug. I reached for the diaper bag to restock the wipes. It sat on my armchair, heavy and bulging, like a bloated tick feasting on the order of my life. As I lifted it, the weight felt wrong. It was too heavy for just diapers and a change of clothes. It felt dense, solid. I placed the bag on the kitchen island. My heart gave a strange, erratic thump. I told myself to stop snooping. I told myself that invading their privacy made me no better than Mark. But the survival instinct that had been dormant for 3 years was now fully awake, and it was screaming at me to look. I unzipped the main compartment. Diapers, wipes, a sticky juice box. I dug deeper, pushing past the clutter. My fingers brushed against something hard at the very bottom, hidden beneath the removable plastic liner of the bag. It was not a tablet this time. It felt like paper, a thick stack of paper. I glanced at the sleeping child and the sleeping dog. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. I pulled the liner up. There, pressed flat against the bottom of the bag, was a large manila envelope. It had been folded in half to fit. I pulled it out. My hands were trembling, not with fear, but with a cold premonition. The return address on the envelope was a law firm based in downtown Philadelphia. The words stamped in red ink across the front were unmistakable. Final notice of default and foreclosure proceedings. The air in my kitchen seemed to drop 20 degrees. I opened the envelope. I did not care about the ethics anymore. I pulled out the documents and began to read. Civil action number 4592. Plaintiff, First National Bank. Defendants, Mark Stevens and Tiffany Stevens. Property address, 124 Maple Drive. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, absorbing the catastrophic reality of their life. They had not paid their mortgage in 7 months. 7 months. Mark had been leasing new cars. Tiffany had been buying designer handbags. And they had not paid a single cent toward the roof over their heads. The bank was seizing the house. The auction date was set for November 15th. That was 3 weeks away. I looked up from the papers, staring blindly at my stainless steel refrigerator. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with the force of a freight train. The sudden need for childcare, the sob story about depression, the increasing number of personal items left in my house, the insistence that I take Daisy full-time. It was not about a job. It was not about family bonding. They were grooming my house. They were preparing to lose their home, and they needed a soft place to land. They were slowly moving in, item by item, establishing a presence. In Pennsylvania, tenancy laws could be tricky. If they could prove they had been staying here, if they had their belongings here, if they received mail here is less than #0. 2# is greater than, I would not be able to kick them out without a lengthy eviction process. They were planning to squat. They were going to leverage the best interests of the child to guilt me, and then the law to force me into letting them stay. I felt bile rise in my throat. I gagged, covering my mouth with my hand. This was not just entitlement. This was a parasitic invasion. They were going to latch onto me, drain my resources, and live in my house while I paid for their mistakes. I looked back at the diaper bag. I needed to see what else was in there. I turned the bag upside down and shook it. Items tumbled out onto the marble counter. A bottle of prescription sleeping pills labeled for Tiffany. A spare set of keys to my front door. Keys I had given Mark for emergencies regarding Leo 3 years ago, and he swore he had lost. And then, something that made my blood run cold. A stack of mail, It was a bundle of letters held together by a rubber band. I picked them up. Mark Stevens. Say, oh Bella Stevens. My address. They had already forwarded their mail to my house. I stared at the envelopes. Change of address, confirmations, credit card bills. They had done this weeks ago. They were already establishing residency. I felt a scream building in my chest. A raw, primal sound that wanted to tear through my throat. I wanted to wake Daisy up. I wanted to kick the dog. I wanted to throw their garbage onto the lawn and set it on fire. But I did not scream. Instead, I walked to the downstairs powder room. I opened the cabinet under the sink, the one I rarely opened because I kept the guest towels there. I pushed the towels aside. There it was, a large toiletry bag, men's deodorant, a razor, a bottle of Tiffany's face wash, a box of tampons. They had been hiding things here every time they visited, like squirrels burying nuts for a long, cold winter. I stood up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me was pale. Her eyes were wide with shock. She looked like a victim. She looked like the woman Mark had walked all over for 10 years. She looked like the woman who apologized when someone else bumped into her. I hated her. I gripped the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles turned the color of bone. Inner monologue. Look at you. You are pathetic. You are standing here shaking because a thief is trying to rob you. You are worried about being polite. You are worried about what Leo will think. Mark is banking on that. He is betting his entire future on your cowardice. He thinks you are weak. He thinks you are still the girl who cried when he raised his voice. I leaned closer to the mirror. My breath fogged the glass. Inner monologue. No more. That woman died today. She died the moment she saw those foreclosure papers. Mark wants a war. He thinks he is the general. He has no idea. He is marching his troops into a minefield. I turned away from the mirror. The shaking in my hands had stopped. A strange, icy calm settled over me. It was the calm of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. It was the calm of an executioner testing the rope. I walked back to the kitchen. I carefully photographed every single document, the foreclosure notice, the dates, the unpaid amounts, the mail addressed to my house. Then I put everything back. I folded the foreclosure papers exactly as they had been. I slid them under the liner. I put the mail back in the side pocket. I put the keys back. I packed the bag perfectly, erasing any sign of my intrusion. I could have called Mark right then. I could have confronted him. I could have thrown the bag on the porch and changed the locks, but that would be too easy. That would give him a chance to spin a story, to play the victim, to gasp and say, Bella, we were just using your address for safety because of mail theft. No, I wanted him to think he was winning. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to move his pawn forward, thinking the board was clear, only to realize I had surrounded his king 10 moves ago. I went to my laptop and opened the secret folder. Date, November 1st. Discovery, foreclosure. Status, total insolvency. Intent, squatting. Evidence, legal documents. Forwarded mail, hidden toiletries. I typed the words with a rhythmic, satisfying clack. Then I opened a new browser tab. I searched for Pennsylvania squatter rights eviction process. I read for 20 minutes. I learned about the nightmare of removing someone once they have established tenancy. Then I searched for Child Protective Services housing requirements. I smiled. It was a cold, humorless expression. If Mark and Tiffany lost their home, and if they could not provide a stable environment for Daisy is less than #0, R. Dinghaodayu. And if I the responsible, financially stable ex-wife, was the one holding all the cards, is less than #0. R. Jinghao Dayu. The phone rang. It was Mark. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. My voice was light, airy, sweet as poisoned honey. Hello. Mark. Hey. Bella. Just checking in. Is everything okay? Tiffany is running a little late. The traffic is brutal. Of course. I said, take your time. Daisy is sleeping like an angel. Great. Listen, Belle, about the full-time thing is less than #0. 2 hash is greater than we really need an answer. Tiffany is stressed. We need to know if we can count on you. I paused. I looked at the diaper bag. I looked at the sleeping dog who would soon be homeless. Mark, I said, I have been thinking about it, and I think we should try it, for Leo's sake. Mark let out a breath he had been holding. Thank God. Bella, you are amazing. Seriously, you are saving us. Inner monologue. Oh, Mark, I am not saving you. I am just fattening the pig before the slaughter. We will start Monday. I said, bring everything she needs. I hung up the phone. I walked over to the kitchen window and watched the rain start to fall. It washed down the glass in long, gray streaks. They were coming. They were going to try to take my home. They were going to try to steal my sanctuary. But they did not know about the camera I had just ordered online. A tiny, hidden nanny cam that looks like a USB charger. They did not know that I had already downloaded the foreclosure listing from the county website. They were walking into a trap, and I was going to close the door behind them, to lock it and swallow the key. I poured myself a glass of wine, a deep, blood-red Pinot Noir. To family, I whispered to the empty room, and then I took a sip, relishing the taste of the storm to come. Sunday was a day of silent, frantic preparation. I did not go to church. I did not go to the grocery store. I stayed inside the perimeter of my property like a commander fortifying a bunker. At 10 in the morning, a locksmith named Gary arrived. He was a man of few words, which I appreciated. He replaced the locks on the front door, the back door, and even the sliding glass door leading to the patio. I watched him work, the metallic rasp of his tools sounding like music to my ears. When he handed me the new set of keys, shiny, jagged teeth of brass, I felt a surge of adrenaline that was almost dizzying. Mark still had the old key. He had stolen it, hidden it, and planned to use it to invade my sanctuary. Now, that key was nothing more than a piece of useless scrap metal. I spent the rest of the day moving things. I took my jewelry box and locked it in a fireproof safe in the basement. I took the external hard drives containing my design portfolio and hid them in the attic. I felt like a squirrel preparing for a harsh winter, or perhaps a woman preparing for a siege. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room, wrapped in a blanket, watching the driveway. Monday morning broke with a sky the color of slate. The air was heavy, damp, and cold. At 7:45, the black Range Rover pulled into my driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I watched through the blinds. Mark got out first. He was wearing a casual polo shirt and jeans, looking ready for a family day. Then Tiffany emerged. She was holding Daisy, but it was what happened next that confirmed every dark suspicion I had harbored. Mark opened the trunk. It was not just a diaper bag this time. He pulled out a large, hard-shell suitcase, then another, then a duffel bag, then a garment bag. I let out a shaky breath, my hand covering my mouth. They were not just dropping Daisy off for daycare. They were moving in. They had packed their lives into that luxury car, intending to walk through my front door, unpack their bags in my guest room, and never leave. The foreclosure clock was ticking, and they had decided that 124 Maple Drive was their new address. I watched Mark walk up the path, dragging the heavy suitcase, his face set in a mask of determination. Tiffany followed, carrying Daisy and a tote bag. They reached the porch. I heard the heavy thud of the suitcase being set down. Then, the sound of a key sliding into the lock. Click. Silence. Jiggle. Jiggle. Mark tried to turn the key. It did not move. I could picture his face. The confusion. The irritation. He pulled the key out. I looked at it and shoved it back in. He tried to force it this time, rattling the doorknob violently. Inner monologue. Turn it all you want. Mark, that door is closed. That chapter is closed. You are on the outside now. Bella. Mark's voice was muffled by the thick wood, but the anger in it cut through the air. He pounded on the door with his fist. 3 sharp, demanding knocks. Bella, open the door. The key is stuck. I did not move. I stood in the hallway, 10 feet away from the door, my phone clutched in my hand. I had already typed out the text message, but I had not sent it yet. I pressed send. Message to Mark. Do not bother. The locks are changed. You are not moving in. Leave before I call the police. Outside. I heard the ping of his phone. There was a pause, a silence that stretched for 10 seconds, heavy and suffocating. Then, the explosion. You bitch. The scream was so loud, so raw, that I flinched physically. Mark kicked the door. The wood shuddered in its frame. Open this door right now. Do you hear me? Open this goddamn door. Mark. Tiffany's voice joined the chorus, high-pitched and hysterical. Bella, what are you doing? We have Daisy out here. It is freezing. Open the door. I walked to the window next to the door and pulled the blinds up just enough for them to see me. Mark's face was pressed against the glass. He looked deranged. His eyes were bulging. His face, a mask of purple rage. When he saw me, he slammed his palm against the window pane. You think you can lock me out of my own house? He roared. My name was on this deed for 10 years. Open the door. Bella, we have rights. He was shouting about rights. He was shouting about ownership. He was proving everything I had suspected. He did not see this as a favor. He saw it as a reclamation. I shook my head slowly. No, I mouthed. That was the spark that ignited the inferno. Mark turned and grabbed a decorative stone from my garden bed. For a second, I thought he was going to throw it through the window. I stepped back, my heart seizing in terror, but he just hurled it at the door, leaving a deep dent in the wood. Then Tiffany stepped forward. She handed Daisy to Mark. Daisy, who was now crying, terrified by her father's screaming, and pulled out her phone. She held it up, aiming the camera at my house, then at herself. She was going live. I watched in horror as she transformed instantly. The rage on her face melted into a twisted mask of sorrow. Tears, seemingly on command, welled up in her eyes. Guys, please help us. She sobbed into the phone, her voice trembling theatrically. We are stranded. My husband's ex-wife is less than #0. Zwei Raute ist größer als she is a monster. She promised to help us with the baby. She promised we could stay here because our heater broke, and now is less than #0. 2# is greater than now she has locked us out. She turned the camera to show Mark holding the crying baby, then back to my closed door. She is keeping us out in the cold. She knows we have nowhere else to go right now. She is trying to hurt a baby just to get back at her ex. Who does that? Look at this. I felt a wave of nausea crash over me. She was weaponizing her audience. She was spinning a narrative where I was the villain. The cruel, vindictive ex-wife leaving a young family on the street. I saw neighbors starting to come out of their houses. Mrs. Gable across the street was standing on her porch, clutching her robe, watching the scene with wide eyes. Mr. Henderson, the neighborhood gossip, was already walking down his driveway, phone in hand. Shame, hot and burning, flushed through my veins. I had spent 3 years building a reputation here. I was the quiet, polite freelancer. I was the good mother. Now, in the span of 5 minutes, Mark and Tiffany were dismantling it all. They were screaming lies so loud that the truth did not matter. Mark saw the neighbors watching and decided to escalate. "She stole my son's money," he shouted, pointing at my house. Addressing the gathering crowd, "She is manipulating the accounts. She is trying to bankrupt us so she can steal full custody. Bella, come out here and face me." My knees buckled. I sank to the floor in the hallway, pressing my back against the wall. Inner monologue. Open the door. Just open it. Let them in. Make them stop screaming. Everyone is looking. Everyone thinks you are crazy. Just surrender. It is easier. Just let them take the house. Panic, like a black oil, was filling my lungs. I could not breathe. The banging on the door was relentless. The sound of Daisy crying was piercing. The lies were echoing in the street. I reached for the deadbolt. My hand shook violently. I just wanted it to end. I wanted the noise to stop. "Mom?" The voice was small, trembling. I froze. I looked up toward the stairs. Leo was sitting on the top step. He was wearing his dinosaur pajamas, hugging his knees to his chest. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. "Why is Daddy screaming?" Leo whispered. "Is he going to hurt us?" The question hung in the air, suspended in the violent noise of the morning. "Is he going to hurt us?" My hand dropped from the deadbolt. I looked at my son. I saw the fear that I had allowed to enter his life. I saw the trauma that Mark was inflicting on him. Right now, in real time, Mark was not just banging on my door. He was banging on my son's sense of safety. He was teaching Leo that violence is a negotiation tactic. He was teaching Leo that women are things to be bullied into submission. Something inside me snapped. It was the sound of the last thread of my hesitation breaking. The shame evaporated. The panic turned into ice. I stood up. I smoothed my sweater. "Go to your room." "Leo," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Put on your noise-canceling headphones. Play your game. Mommy is going to handle this." But Mom is less than #0. R. Jinghao Dayu. Go. Leo, lock your door. Do not come out until I say so. He looked at me for a second, seeing the change in my eyes. He nodded and scrambled back up the stairs. I waited until I heard his door click shut. Then I turned back to the front door. I did not open it. I walked into the kitchen and picked up my phone. I did not text Mark. I did not check social media. I dialed 911. 911. "What is your emergency?" "I have intruders on my property," I said. My voice was cold, precise. "They are attempting to break down my front door. They are violent. There is a child involved." I gave the address. I gave the description. Then I walked to the window. Mark was now kicking the door with a rhythmic, dull thud. Tiffany was screaming at Mrs. Gable, who had dared to ask them to keep it down. They looked so ugly. I thought, not physically, but their souls. They were ugly, desperate, gaping things. I opened the camera app on my phone. I did not hide. I walked right up to the window, pulled the blinds all the way up, and started recording. Mark saw me. He stopped kicking. He pointed a finger at me through the glass. You are dead. Bella. You hear me? You are dead. I will take Leo. I will take this house. I will burn you to the ground. I did not flinch. I zoomed in on his face. I captured the vein throbbing in his forehead. I captured the spittle flying from his lips. Then I panned to Tiffany, who was still live streaming. Say hello to the judge. Tiffany, I whispered to the empty room. I captured the suitcases. I captured the aggression. I captured the absolute, undeniable proof that this was not a drop-off, but a hostile takeover. Sirens wailed in the distance, low at first, then growing louder, cutting through the morning air like a knife. Mark heard them. His head snapped toward the street. The color drained from his face. Tiffany lowered her phone. The performance faltered. Let us go, Mark said, grabbing Tiffany's arm. Let us go. Now. No, I whispered, pressing my hand against the cool glass. Stay. The party is just getting started. Mark scrambled toward the Range Rover. He grabbed one suitcase, throwing it into the trunk. He left the other one on my porch. He was panicking. The bully had been punched back, and now he was running. Tiffany strapped Daisy into the car with clumsy, frantic movements. The police cruiser turned the corner, lights flashing blue and red against the gray sky. Mark jumped into the driver's seat. He revved the engine and peeled out of my driveway, nearly clipping the mailbox. He swerved around the police car, speeding down the street in a desperate attempt to flee. The police car did not chase him. It slowed and pulled into my driveway. I stopped recording. The silence that returned to the house was sudden and ringing. I looked at the dent in my door. I looked at the suitcase left abandoned on my porch. My legs finally gave out. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor again. But this time, I was not hiding. I was resting. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I had done it. I had faced the monster, and I had not opened the door. I heard heavy footsteps on the porch, followed by a polite, firm knock. Police? A voice called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I took a deep breath. I stood up. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked tired. I looked pale, but I looked like the owner of this house. I walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. Inner monologue. This is not the end. This is just the opening shot. Mark ran away today, but he will be back. He will come back with lawyers. He will come back with lies. But now I have a police report. Now I have footage. Now I have a war chest. I opened the door. The officer was young, with a kind face. He looked at the dent in the door, then at the suitcase, then at me. "Mrs. Stevens?" he asked. "It is Miss Vance." I corrected him, using my maiden name for the first time in 10 years. It felt strange on my tongue, sharp and new. "And yes, officer, I would like to file a report." As I spoke to him, describing the attempted break-in, the threats, the violence, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I looked past the officer, down the empty street where Mark had fled. "Run, Mark," I thought, run as fast as you can, but you cannot outrun the truth. And you certainly cannot outrun a mother who has finally decided to fight back. I glanced up at the second-floor window. Leo's blinds were closed. He was safe, and as long as I was standing at this door, he always would be. The courier arrived at 10 in the morning on a Thursday, 3 days after the police had escorted Mark off my property. The courier was a young man with a bored expression, chewing gum with a rhythmic indifference that contrasted sharply with the gravity of the envelope he held. He extended a digital pad for me to sign, his eyes barely meeting mine. I signed my name. The stylus felt heavy in my hand. The envelope was thick, white, and bore the embossed logo of a law firm I recognized immediately, Harriman, Tate, and Associates. They were Mark's divorce lawyers. They were the pit bulls he had hired 3 years ago to try and bully me out of my alimony. They were expensive, aggressive, and entirely out of Mark's current price range, which told me one thing immediately. He was desperate enough to put a retainer on a credit card he likely could not pay off. I took the envelope into the kitchen. I did not open it immediately. I made a cup of tea, Earl Grey, and watched the steam rise in curling ribbons against the morning light. The house was quiet. Leo was at school. The locks were new. The cameras were recording. I was safe, physically, but as I slid my finger under the flap of the envelope, I knew the war had shifted from the physical realm to the paper one. I pulled out the documents. There were 20 pages. The header read, "Notice of intent to sue and demand for partition of real property." I sat down at the island and began to read. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of fiction woven into legal threats. Mark was suing me. First, he was claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress upon a minor. The suit alleged that by refusing him entry to his family home and calling the police, I had traumatized Daisy and caused her irreparable psychological harm. He was demanding $50,000 in damages. But the second claim was the one that made my blood run cold. Mark was demanding a partition by sale of my home. His argument was twisted but legally dangerous, because Mark's name had been on the original deed when we bought the house 10 years ago, and because, according to his lawyer's fabrication, he had contributed significantly to the maintenance and equity of the property post-divorce via verbal agreements. He was claiming he still held an equitable interest. He was asking the court to force the sale of the house so he could extract 50% of the current market value. He was trying to sell my house out from under me. He was not just trying to squat anymore. He was trying to liquidate my sanctuary to pay off his gambling debts and fund his mistress's lifestyle. I read the last paragraph, where his lawyer demanded an emergency mediation to discuss my surrender of the property to avoid a lengthy trial. I lowered the papers. My hands were trembling, not with fear this time, but with a cold, vibrating rage. It was the sensation of a sleeping giant finally waking up. He wanted a legal battle. He wanted to talk about finances. I looked at the camera lens hidden in the USB charger on the counter. Fine. Mark, let us talk about finances. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was not related to me, despite the shared last name, but she was the closest thing to a guardian angel I had ever known. She was 60 years old, with hair the color of steel and eyes that could cut glass. She wore Chanel suits like armor and treated the courtroom like her personal hunting ground. She was the reason I had custody of Leo. She was the reason I had the house. Eleanor read the letter. She did not frown. She did not look worried. Instead, A slow, predatory smile spread across her face, revealing perfectly straight, white teeth. She tossed the letter onto her mahogany desk as if it were a piece of used tissue. He is bluffing. Bella, Eleanor said, her voice smooth and deep. This is a Hail Mary pass. He has no claim to the house. The divorce decree was final. The quitclaim deed was signed and recorded 3 years ago. He is hoping you are stupid. He is hoping you will panic and write him a check to make him go away. I know, I said, clasping my hands in my lap, but he is dangerous. Eleanor, he is desperate. He is about to lose his own house. So he is trying to steal mine. Desperate men make mistakes, Eleanor said. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine, and Mark has made a fatal one. He has invited the law into his life at the exact moment he is breaking it. I frowned. What do you mean? Eleanor opened a file folder on her desk. Bella, you brought me the bank statements from Leo's college fund. You showed me the foreclosure notices. But did you look at Tiffany's employment status? I shook my head. She said she had an interview. Mark said she got the job. Eleanor let out a sharp, dry laugh. There is no job. Bella, we ran a preliminary check. Tiffany is currently collecting state unemployment benefits. She has been claiming 0 income for 6 months. My mouth fell open slightly. If she is collecting unemployment, Eleanor continued, tapping a manicured nail on the desk. She is required to actively search for work and report any income. But you have evidence that she is spending thousands of dollars from a custodial account on luxury goods. That is fraud. That is tax evasion. And Mark, if he is knowingly aiding her, or if he is hiding assets in that custodial account to avoid paying his own creditors while claiming poverty to the family court, to lower your alimony is less than #0. 2# is greater than well. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, looking satisfied. That is grand larceny. That is bankruptcy fraud. That is prison time. The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioning sounded like a roar in my ears. Prison time. I had just wanted them to leave me alone. I had just wanted to protect Leo. But now, the scope of their deception was laid bare. They were not just bad parents. They were criminals. They were grifters, living a lie funded by the government and my son's future. So, what do we do? I asked. Do we countersue? Eleanor shook her head. Not yet. If we file a motion now, they will clam up. They will hide. They will destroy evidence. We need to let them think they are winning. We need to let them think you are scared. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Philadelphia skyline. We need more proof. Bella, we need to prove that Tiffany is not looking for work. We need to prove that the money they are spending is not for essentials but for lifestyle. We need to prove that Mark is living beyond his means while crying poverty. And most importantly, is less than #0. Jinghao Dayu. She turned back to me. We need to catch them in a lie so big that no judge in this state will ever let them near a child again. I looked at Eleanor. I felt a cold resolve settling in my stomach, replacing the anxiety. I can get the proof, I said. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. How? They think I am weak. I said, they think I am the same woman who cooked their dinner and washed their clothes. They think I am desperate to keep the peace for Leo. I stood up. I am going to invite them back. Eleanor stared at me for a moment, assessing me. Then, her smile returned, sharper than before. Be careful, Bella. When you wrestle with pigs, you get dirty. I picked up my purse. I do not mind getting dirty, Eleanor, as long as I am the one holding the hose at the end. The investigation began the next morning. I did not hire a private investigator. I could not afford the best one, and I did not trust the cheap ones. Besides, no one knew their habits better than I did. I knew Mark's favorite coffee shop. I knew Tiffany's obsession with a specific brand of organic makeup. I dropped Leo off at school and drove into the city. I parked my modest sedan 2 blocks away from the address listed on Tiffany's job interview location, the marketing firm Mark had bragged about. I sat there for 3 hours. At 10 o'clock, Tiffany's car should have been in the employee lot. It was not. I checked the tracking app on the old iPad, which I had brought with me. The blue dot representing Tiffany's phone was not at the office. It was 3 miles away, at a high-end outdoor shopping complex in King of Prussia. I started the car. 30 minutes later, I was walking through the shopping center, wearing a baseball cap and large sunglasses. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad spy movie. But the adrenaline kept my senses sharp. I spotted her outside a designer athletic wear store. Tiffany was walking with a strut, holding a large paper bag. She was wearing the cashmere sweater she had left at my house, the one I had put in the guest closet. She looked radiant, carefree. She did not look like a woman suffering from debilitating postpartum depression. She did not look like a woman on the brink of homelessness. She sat down at an outdoor cafe table and ordered a glass of wine. It was 11 in the morning. I found a spot on a bench 50 feet away, hidden behind a large potted fern. I pulled out my phone and switched to the camera. I zoomed in. Tiffany was not alone for long. A man approached her table. He was young, fit, wearing gym clothes. He was definitely not Mark. He leaned down and kissed her on the cheek. A lingering, intimate kiss that lasted too long to be platonic. Tiffany laughed, touching his arm, her body language open and flirtatious. My shutter clicked silently. Click. The kiss. Click. The wine. Click. The shopping bags. I recorded a video as well. I captured the way she looked at him. It was the look of a woman who was bored with her life and seeking thrills. It was the look of a woman who had no respect for her marriage. But then, the man sat down, and I heard snippets of their conversation carried by the wind. Zou ting Hallin. Zwei Raude ist größer als sie ist such an idiot. Tiffany's voice drifted over. He thinks the lawsuit will scare her. He thinks we are going to get half the house. The man laughed. And if you do, then we are set. Baby, we take the cash, clear the debts, and leave this miserable winter behind. Mark wants to move to Florida. And the kid? The man asked. Daisy? Tiffany waved her hand dismissively. Mark is obsessed with her. He thinks she is his little princess. It is honestly kind of pathetic how much he dotes on her, considering is less than #0. How da you? She stopped. She took a sip of wine, looking around, conspiratorially. Considering what? The man asked. Tiffany giggled. Nothing. Just is less than #0. 2# is greater than, let us just say, Mark is not exactly a biologist. My heart stopped beating for a second. Mark is not exactly a biologist. The implication hit me with the force of a physical blow. I lowered the phone. My hands were shaking. I had come here looking for financial fraud. I had come here to prove she was lying about her job, but I had found something far more destructive. I thought about Daisy, that little girl with the brown eyes. Mark's eyes? Or were they just generic brown eyes? I thought about Mark's obsession with having a daughter, his constant bragging about how she was his legacy. If Daisy was not his, is less than #0. How da you? If Tiffany had trapped him into a marriage, into debt, into a foreclosure, all based on a lie about paternity, is less than #0. R. Jinghao Dayu. This was not just fraud. This was a nuclear bomb. I watched them for another 10 minutes. I took more photos. I documented every touch, every smile. Then I quietly stood up and walked away. I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at the steering wheel. I had the ammunition Eleanor wanted. I had enough to destroy their credibility in court, but I needed to be sure. I needed concrete proof. A conversation overheard in a cafe was hearsay. Photos of a flirtation were just suspicion. I needed DNA, and to get DNA, I needed access to the child, or the mother. I took a deep breath. The plan Eleanor and I had discussed was dangerous. It involved opening my door to the wolves again. But now, the stakes were higher. I picked up my phone and opened the text thread with Tiffany. Message: Tiffany, I have had some time to cool down. I think I overreacted on Monday. The police were unnecessary. I am sorry. I waited. My thumb hovered over the screen. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Reply: You are crazy. Bella. Mark is furious. He is going through with the lawsuit. I typed back, keeping my tone submissive. Defeated. Message: I know, and I cannot afford a lawyer. I want to settle this. Can you come over? Just you? Mark is too angry right now. I want to talk woman to woman. Maybe we can work out an arrangement for Daisy. I bought the organic blueberries you asked for. It was the bait, the surrender, the appeal to her ego and her greed. 5 minutes passed. Reply: Fine. I will come tomorrow at 10. But if you pull anything, I am calling Mark. Message: I promise. Just come. I want to make peace. I lowered the phone. I drove home in silence. The city blurred past me. When I got home, I walked into the bathroom. I looked at the trash can. I had emptied it yesterday, but I had not taken the bag out to the curb yet. I dug through the wastebasket until I found it. The razor, the disposable razor Tiffany had left in my guest bathroom. The one I had thrown into the closet and then eventually discarded. It still had hair on it. I placed it into a Ziploc bag. Then I went to Leo's room. I found an old hairbrush of Mark's that he had left behind years ago. One that Leo sometimes played with. It was a long shot, but there might be a follicle. No, that was too old. I needed something fresh from Mark. Or Daisy. Tomorrow, Tiffany would come. She would bring Daisy. I would offer them a drink. I would offer them a snack. I walked to the kitchen and opened the cupboard. I took out a fresh glass. I polished it until it sparkled. This glass was for Tiffany. I was going to play the gracious hostess. I was going to apologize. I was going to listen to her complaints. And while she was gloating, while she was drinking my wine and thinking she had won, I was going to steal the truth right out from under her nose. I looked at the text message again. I want to talk woman to woman. Oh, we would talk, but the most important conversation would happen later. In a lab, under a microscope, Mark had demanded I babysit his affair baby. He had rubbed my nose in his fertility and my failure. But if that baby was not his is less than #0. R. Jinghao Dayu. If the symbol of his betrayal was actually a symbol of her betrayal is less than #0. R. Jinghao Dayu. I smiled. It was a terrifying expression in the reflection of the dark window. I would not just win the lawsuit. I would dismantle his entire reality. I turned off the lights in the kitchen. The trap was set. The cheese was in place. Now, I just had to wait for the rat. The truce began with a lie. I had arranged the living room with the precision of a stage director. The curtains were drawn just enough to let in a soft, non-threatening light. On the coffee table, I placed a bowl of the specific organic blueberries Tiffany had demanded. $20 for a pint that would be gone in 10 minutes. Next to it, a pot of chamomile tea, steaming gently. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. The house was silent. Leo was at school, safe from the toxicity that was about to walk through my door. When the doorbell rang, I did not jump. I smoothed the front of my linen trousers, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror to ensure my expression conveyed the right amount of defeat, and opened the door. Tiffany stood there. She looked like a woman who believed she had already won the war and was just arriving to accept the surrender. She wore large sunglasses and the cashmere sweater she had previously abandoned in my home. In her arms, Daisy squirmed, her face sticky with something orange. "Hi," Tiffany said. She did not smile. She stepped past me without waiting for an invitation, the scent of expensive perfume trailing behind her. "Hello, Tiffany. Thank you for coming." I closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt final. She walked into the living room and dropped Daisy onto the rug. The child immediately crawled toward the television. Tiffany collapsed onto my sofa, kicking off her designer sneakers. She looked around the room with a critical eye, as if she were already measuring the drapes for replacement. "God, it is exhausting." Tiffany Seahill, rubbing her temples. "Mark is impossible right now. He is just screaming all the time. He says the lawsuit is going to crush you. He says you are going to be living in a studio apartment by Christmas." She picked up a handful of blueberries and tossed them into her mouth, chewing loudly. I sat opposite her, keeping my hands folded in my lap. I made myself look small. I hunched my shoulders slightly. "I know," I said softly. "That is why I wanted to talk. I cannot afford a lawyer. Tiffany, I cannot fight Mark. I just want peace." Tiffany smirked. It was a cruel, satisfied expression. "Well, you should have thought about that before you called the cops on us." That was humiliating. "Bella," my live stream audience was horrified. "People are saying you are a child abuser." I felt a flash of heat in my chest, but I swallowed it down. "I am sorry. I lied. I panicked." "Look," Tiffany said, leaning forward. "Mark wants the house, but if you agree to sign it over quietly, maybe we can work out a visitation schedule for Leo. Mark really misses him." She was leveraging my son. She was threatening my home, and she was eating my fruit. I reached for the teapot. "Tea?" I asked. "Sure," she said. I poured the tea. My movements were slow, deliberate. "While you are here," I said, "I was hoping you could help me with something." I found some more of Daisy's things in the closet. I put them in a bag in the kitchen. "Do you mind grabbing them before you leave?" Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Fine, whatever." She took a sip of tea, then set the cup down. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, the latest model, encased in a glittery pink shell, and began typing furiously. "Who are you texting?" I asked innocently. "Mark?" "No, just is less than #0. 2# is greater than a friend," she said, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips. She placed the phone face down on the coffee table. Then, the moment arrived. "Can I use your bathroom?" she asked. That drive over here was brutal on my bladder. "Of course," I said. "You know where it is." Tiffany stood up. She looked at Daisy, who was happily banging a wooden block against the floor. She looked at me. Then she looked at the bathroom down the hall. She left the room. She left the phone. I waited 1 heartbeat, 2. I heard the bathroom door click shut. I heard the lock turn. I moved with the speed of a striking cobra. I reached across the table and grabbed the phone. It was warm from her hand. I tapped the screen. It prompted for a passcode. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, praying to whatever God watched over scorned women. I remembered the pattern I had seen her use a dozen times when she dropped Daisy off. A simple L shape, top left to bottom right. I traced the pattern on the screen. The phone unlocked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I did not have much time, maybe 2 minutes. I did not look at her social media. I went straight to her messages. The most recent thread was not with Mark. It was with a contact saved simply as Jim. I opened it. The texts loaded, and my world tilted on its axis. Jim, did you tell the old witch to sign the papers yet? Tiffany, working on it. She is pathetic. She is practically begging for mercy. I am eating her blueberries right now. Lol. Jim, good. We need that equity cash. Babe, my car payments are killing me. Tiffany, patience. Once Mark sells this place, we take the cut and run. Mark is so desperate to keep me happy, he will sign anything. I scrolled up. My thumb trembled. I needed more. I needed the smoking gun. And then I found it. Dated 2 weeks ago. Tiffany. Mark is talking about doing a genetic history test for Daisy. For health reasons. I am freaking out. Jim, relax. He will not find out. Just tell him she takes after your side of the family. Tiffany, she does not look like him at all. Brad, she has your nose. If he finds out she is not his, he will kill me, and the money stops. Jim, he will not find out. You said he is an idiot. Just play the victim. Cry a little. He eats that up. I stared at the screen. The words blurred before my eyes. If he finds out she is not his. Daisy was not Mark's daughter. Mark, the narcissist who had tormented me for not giving him a girl. Mark, who was suing me to provide a home for his legacy. Mark, who was bankrupting our son's future to support this family. He was raising another man's child. He was destroying my life to support a lie. The sound of the toilet flushing echoed down the hallway. Panic seized me. I needed proof. I could not just remember this. I pulled my own phone from my pocket. I snapped photos of the screen. 1, 2, 3. I captured the dates. I captured the admission of paternity fraud. I captured the conspiracy to steal my home equity. I heard the tap turning on in the bathroom. I quickly exited the message thread. I swiped the app closed. I wiped the screen of the pink phone against my linen trousers to remove my fingerprints. I placed it back on the table, face down, exactly as it had been. I sat back in my chair. I picked up my teacup. My hands were shaking so badly that the liquid sloshed over the rim, scalding my finger. I did not feel the pain. I felt only a cold, dark triumph. The bathroom door opened. Tiffany walked back into the room. She looked refreshed. She checked her reflection in the mirror over the mantelpiece, fluffing her hair. Sorry about that, she said. So, where were we? Oh, right, the house. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the greed in her eyes. I saw the arrogance. I saw a woman who thought she was the predator, unaware that she had just walked into the cage of a much bigger beast. We were talking about the timeline, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Right, Tiffany said, sitting down and reaching for her phone. She unlocked it casually, checking to see if Brad, had replied. She had no idea that I now held the keys to her destruction. I looked down at Daisy. The little girl looked up at me and smiled. For the first time, I looked closely at her features, the shape of her nose, the set of her eyes. I realized with a jolt that I had been seeing Mark in her because I expected to see Mark. But now, the illusion was stripped away. She was a stranger, an innocent, pawned stranger. I stood up. I will get those things from the kitchen, I said. I walked into the kitchen. I gripped the counter. Breathing heavily, I had the proof of the affair. I had the admission of paternity fraud. But Eleanor, my lawyer, had said we needed to be bulletproof. Text messages could be claimed as fake. They could be explained away as jokes. I needed biology. I walked back into the living room. Daisy had finished her blueberries. She had dropped the plastic spoon onto the rug. Tiffany was busy texting. I picked up the spoon. It was covered in Daisy's saliva. Here? Let me take this, I said. I walked back to the kitchen. I did not wash the spoon. I opened a Ziploc bag and dropped it inside. I sealed it. Then I went to the drawer where I had kept the old hairbrush of Mark's, the one I had found yesterday. It had a few graying hairs caught in the bristles. I bagged that too. I had the mother's admission. I had the child's DNA. I had the father's DNA. I walked back into the living room with the bag of clothes I had promised. Here you go, I said. Tiffany stood up, grabbing the bag. Great. Well, I should go. Mark is waiting. Think about what I said. Bella, sign the papers. Do not make this harder on yourself. She picked up Daisy. She picked up her purse. She walked to the door. Goodbye, Bella, she said, not looking back. Goodbye, Tiffany, I whispered. I watched her car back out of the driveway. I watched her drive away, thinking she had successfully intimidated me. I locked the door. I went back to the living room and sat down where she had sat. I looked at the photos on my phone. I could call Mark right now. I could send him these photos. I could end the lawsuit today. He would be devastated. He would turn his rage on Tiffany, but then is less than #0. 2# is greater than he would still be Mark. He would still be the man who tried to take my house. He would play the victim. He would say he was duped. He would try to crawl back into my life, crying for sympathy. No, that was not enough. I did not just want to stop the lawsuit. I wanted to burn his world to the ground. I wanted him to stand in a courtroom, arrogant and demanding, and have the floor drop out from under him in front of a judge, in front of the public, in front of everyone. I wanted the humiliation to be total. I scrolled through the text messages again. He is an idiot. Yes, Tiffany, he is, but so are you. I picked up the Ziploc bag with the spoon. I am going to the lab, I said to the empty room. The public fallout she was worried about, the online hate she had stirred up against me. I smiled. Just wait until the internet finds out that the devoted mother begging for help is actually a con artist, cuckolding her husband with a gym rat named Brad. The narrative was about to change, and I was going to be the author. I grabbed my keys. The victim was gone. The narrator was here, and this story was about to get very, very dark. It had been 10 days since my private meeting with Tiffany. 10 days of silence that felt less like peace and more like the drawn breath before a scream. The lab results had arrived in a plain white envelope on Tuesday. I had opened them with surgical precision, read the single page of data, and then placed them in my safe alongside the text message screenshots. Probability of paternity, 0%. It was a cold, scientific confirmation of a catastrophic betrayal. Mark had spent 2 years doting on a child, bragging about a legacy, and suing his ex-wife to support a bloodline that ended at his doorstep. I hadn't slept much. I spent my nights pacing the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my feet like the bones of an old beast. I was holding a grenade, and I knew exactly when I was going to pull the pin. The invitation came via email. It was a digital flyer, gaudy and bright, featuring balloons and a cartoon princess. You are invited to Daisy's 3rd birthday party. Location, the Golden Oak Bistro. Time, Saturday, 1 p.m. Mark had sent it. The audacity was almost impressive. After suing me, after his wife had live-streamed lies about me, he was inviting me to a birthday party, but the subtext was clear in the follow-up text he sent. Bring Leo. He needs to see his sister. And Bella? Be civil. We have important guests coming. Important guests meant people he wanted to impress. It meant he needed his harmonious, blended family prop. It meant he needed me to play the role of the defeated, compliant ex-wife to smooth over the cracks in his public image. I replied with one word, yes. The Golden Oak Bistro was a mid-range restaurant that Mark liked because it had white tablecloths but affordable appetizers. When I arrived with Leo, the party was already in full swing. The private room was decorated with an excess of pink streamers. A banner reading Happy Birthday Princess hung crookedly over the buffet table. Mark stood in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne that I knew he couldn't afford. He was wearing a suit that was a little too tight, his face flushed with alcohol and performative joy. Tiffany was next to him, wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously bridal. Holding Daisy, Daisy looked overwhelmed, pulling at the scratchy lace of her outfit. When Mark saw us, his smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a shark's smile. Bella, Leo, he boomed, drawing the attention of the 20 or so guests. So glad you could make it. Look, everyone, the whole family is here. He walked over and clapped a hand on Leo's shoulder, squeezing a little too hard. Hey, buddy, ready to celebrate your sister? Leo looked up at his father, then at me. He looked scared. Hi, Dad, he whispered. Go get some cake. Leo, I said softly, nudging him toward the dessert table where other kids were gathered. I wanted him away from the blast zone. Mark turned to me, his voice dropping to a hiss. You look tired. Bella, lawyers keeping you up at night? I sleep fine. Mark, I said, clutching my purse. Inside, the envelope burned against my hip. Good, he sneered. Because my lawyer says the judge is going to fast-track the partition. You might want to start looking for boxes. I didn't respond. I just looked past him. The room was filled with Mark's friends, mostly business contacts he was trying to leverage. But there was a group of people near the door who didn't fit in. 3 men in dark suits. They weren't drinking. They weren't smiling. They were watching Mark with the predatory focus of wolves circling a wounded deer. I recognized one of them. He was a process server I had seen in court years ago. The creditors had arrived. Mark hadn't noticed them yet. He was too busy playing the king of his crumbling castle. He raised his glass for a toast. Everyone. If I could have your attention, Mark shouted. The room quieted. I just want to say how blessed I am to have my beautiful wife, Tiffany, to have my son, Leo, and of course, my little miracle, Daisy. He looked down at Daisy with a teary-eyed adoration that made my stomach turn. Daisy is the best thing that ever happened to me. Mark continued, his voice cracking with emotion. She is my heart. She is my legacy. Tiffany smiled nervously. Shifting Daisy on her hip, she glanced at her phone, then at the door. She looked ready to bolt, and Mark added, turning his gaze to me, I want to thank Bella for finally stepping up, for realizing that family comes first. It was a direct taunt, a public claiming of victory. Then, the doors opened. The three men in suits stepped forward. The music stopped. The chatter died. Mark Stevens? The lead man asked. His voice was loud, flat, and carried to every corner of the room. Mark froze. Yes? Who are you? This is a private party. We are from First National Bank, the man said, and these gentlemen are from the IRS. The room gasped. Mark turned pale. This is less than #0. 2# is greater than this is a mistake. My lawyer is handling this. Your lawyer resigned this morning. Mr. Stevens, the man said, holding out a stack of papers. We are here to serve you with a seizure notice for your vehicle, the Range Rover outside, and we are freezing your accounts effective immediately due to suspicious activity regarding the custodial funds. What? Mark stammered. You can't do that. That's my son's money. Exactly, the agent said, and you have been using it to pay for is less than #0. 2# is greater. Then he glanced at a paper. Sao Yu Tsing Hall, Lean, 2# is greater than jewelry. Spa treatments, and a lease on a vehicle you cannot afford. Mark looked around wildly. His facade was cracking. The successful businessman was dissolving, revealing the desperate con artist beneath. He looked at Tiffany. Tell them it's a mistake. Tiffany took a step back. Y è minore di cancelletto 0. 2# is greater than, I don't know what they're talking about. Mark turned on me. His eyes were red, manic. He lunged toward me, grabbing my arm. You? He screamed. You did this. You called them. Bella, you have to help me. You have to tell them the house is ours. You have to sign the equity over right now. We can pay them off. He was shaking me. The guests were murmuring. Leo dropped his plate of cake. The crash echoing in the silence. Let go of me, I said, my voice ice cold. Sign the papers. Mark roared, raising his hand as if to strike me. You owe me. I gave you a family. I gave you everything. That was it. The moment I wrenched my arm free, I reached into my purse. You gave me nothing. Mark, I said, my voice rising, clear and sharp. You gave me debt. You gave me trauma. And you gave me lies. I pulled out the first document, the bank statements showing the theft from Leo's fund. I threw them into the air. They fluttered down like snow around us. You stole from your son, I said. Mark stared at the papers. Bella, stop. Nietzsche, R. Tsinghaotayu. And you, I said, turning to Tiffany. She froze, her eyes widening in terror. You want to talk about family? You want to talk about legacy? I pulled out the photos of the text messages. I pulled out the DNA test results. Happy birthday, Daisy, I said, looking at the confused child. I thrust the papers into Mark's chest. Read it. Mark looked down. His hands shook as he grabbed the papers. He read the texts first. If he finds out she is not his, is less than #0. R. Tsinghaotayu. His face went gray. He looked up at Tiffany. What is this? It's fake, Tiffany screamed, her voice shrill. She faked it. Mark, don't believe her. Read the next page, I commanded. Mark flipped the page. The DNA results. Probability of paternity, 0%. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the world. Mark made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was a guttural, animal noise of pure agony. He looked at Daisy, the child he had worshipped, the child he had destroyed his first marriage for, the child he was suing me to support. She wasn't his. He looked at Tiffany. The adoration in his eyes vanished, replaced by a hatred so pure it was terrifying to behold. "Who is he?" Mark whispered. "Who is the father?" Tiffany backed away, clutching Daisy. "Mark, please, is less than #0. 2# is greater than it was, just is less than #0. 2# is greater than we were, on a break, is less than #0. R. Dayu. A break? Mark screamed. He threw the champagne glass at the wall. It shattered, sending shards of glass raining down on the buffet table. "I ruined my life for you. I left my wife for you. I stole from my son for you." He lunged at her. Chaos erupted. The IRS agents moved in, tackling Mark before he could reach Tiffany. He fought them, screaming obscenities, screaming about betrayal, screaming like a man whose soul was being torn out. Tiffany didn't wait. She didn't check on Mark. She didn't look at me. She grabbed her purse and ran. She ran out the side door, dragging a wailing Daisy behind her. I stood in the center of the storm. I watched Mark being handcuffed, his face pressed against the carpeted floor, sobbing. I looked at Leo. He was standing by the dessert table, crying silently. I walked over to him. I picked him up, burying his face in my shoulder. "It's over, baby," I whispered. "It's all over." I walked out of the room. I didn't look back at Mark. I didn't look back at the ruined party. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I put Leo in the car. My hands were steady. I had won. I had protected my son. I had saved my house. But as I drove away, I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. I thought of Daisy. I thought of the innocent child who had just lost the only father she had ever known, and whose mother was a fleeing con artist. I had destroyed the villains, but I had also burned down the village. And in the rearview mirror, I saw the flashing lights of the police cars arriving at the bistro. The party was over. The hangover was just beginning. The days following the birthday party were a blur of legal motions and quiet victories. Mark was denied bail. The charges were extensive: fraud, embezzlement, assault, resisting arrest. The sheer volume of evidence I had provided to the police, the bank statements, the documented harassment, the unauthorized use of custodial funds, painted a picture of a man who was not just a bad father, but a financial predator. He sat in a county jail cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his complexion. He had lost everything. His job fired him the morning after the arrest. The bank foreclosed on his house 3 days later. His legacy had been exposed as a lie. Tiffany was gone. She had fled the state the night of the party, taking the cash she had stashed and abandoning everything else. She didn't take Daisy. That was the twist that haunted me. Tiffany had dropped Daisy off at a fire station 20 miles away with a note that simply said, "I cannot afford her. Ask Mark." She chose her freedom over her child. She chose to run from the fraud charges rather than face them as a mother. Daisy was now a ward of the state. I sat in my lawyer Eleanor's office one last time. The sun was streaming through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the polished mahogany desk. "It is done, Bella," Eleanor said, handing me a thick document. Full legal and physical custody of Leo. Mark's parental rights have been suspended pending the criminal trial. But given the charges of stealing from Leo's fund, no judge will ever let him manage a penny or make a decision for that boy again. I took the papers. They felt heavy, like a stone tablet. "And the house?" "Yours," Eleanor said. The lawsuit for partition was dismissed with prejudice. Mark has no assets to claim anything. You are free. Bella, completely and utterly free. I nodded. I should have felt elated. I should have felt triumphant. "There is one more thing," Eleanor said, her voice softer. She slid a smaller folder across the desk. Child Protective Services reached out. "Regarding Daisy, I froze because Mark is listed on her birth certificate, even though the DNA proves otherwise. He is legally her father until a court rules otherwise, but he is in jail. The mother is a fugitive. You are the only stable figure she has had contact with." The caseworker asked, "Is less than #0. 2# is greater than if you would be interested in fostering her or adopting." I looked at the folder. Inside was a picture of Daisy. She looked terrified, sitting in a generic office, holding a worn-out teddy bear. I thought about the little girl who had smashed my vase. I thought about the innocent child who had been used as a pawn in a twisted game of greed. I thought about how she had looked at me at the party, confused and scared. I could save her. I had the room. I had the money. I had the heart. It would be the ultimate act of redemption. The final proof that I was the good person Mark claimed I wasn't. It would be the saintly thing to do. I closed my eyes. I imagined my life with Daisy. The tantrums, the reminders of Tiffany, the shadow of Mark hanging over my house forever. I imagined Leo, forced to share his mother with the living embodiment of his father's betrayal. I opened my eyes. "No," I said. Eleanor didn't blink. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," I said. My voice was steady. "I have a son to raise. I have a life to rebuild. I cannot save everyone, Eleanor, and I refuse to let the wreckage of Mark's life burn down my own anymore." Eleanor smiled. A genuine, warm smile. "Good for you, Bella." That evening, I sat on my patio with a glass of expensive red wine. The air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Leo was inside, playing a video game, his laughter drifting through the screen door. He was happy. He was safe. His college fund was depleted. Yes, but I would work. I would rebuild it. We would be fine. I thought about Mark, sitting in his cell, realizing that the daughter he adored wasn't his, and the son he ignored was the only true legacy he had left and lost. I thought about Daisy, alone in the system. It was a tragedy, a dark, ugly tragedy. But it was not my tragedy. People would call me selfish. The neighbors who saw the police cars, the online commenters who only knew half the story. They would say I was heartless for turning my back on a child. Let them talk. I took a sip of wine. It tasted rich, complex, and bitter. Mark had spent years trying to break me. He had tried to turn me into a doormat, a servant, a bank. He had tried to weaponize my empathy against me. But he had failed. He had forged me into something else entirely. Something harder, something sharper. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the sliding door. The woman staring back wasn't the saintly mother anymore. She was a survivor. She was a protector. And she was finally, terrifyingly, whole. Everyone calls me selfish. I whispered to the night. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the dark liquid coat the sides. But as I sit here, in my house, listening to my son laugh is less than #0. R. Dayu. I took another sip, savoring the silence that belonged only to me. 2# is greater than I realized that selfishness is the most expensive armor I have ever bought, and it was worth every penny. I set the glass down. I stood up and walked inside, locking the door behind me.